You're wrong. You're a bad person. You did something wrong. It's your fault. All of this is a blame game of the ego. Not just the ego, because there's something deeper behind the blame game. But just think about it. Just think about how many times in your life you have been blamed. In today's age, with Facebook comments and comments on YouTube videos and forums and this and that, you can be exposed to more blame than ever before by people you don't even know. So when you think about this, what's the most common reaction to being blamed? Well, there are two reactions. You can either deny that you did something wrong, seek to deflect responsibility away from yourself, or you can accept the responsibility and then seek to do something about it, either compensate for what you supposedly did wrong, or at the very least feel bad about it. Because there's an entire culture that says that if you feel bad about having done something wrong, then it wasn't so bad after all. And when you think about this, does it really make any sense? Do you really want to live your entire life trapped in this game? You look at how many people out there, they live their entire lives in this blame game. They feel blamed, and in order to compensate for it, they are seeking to blame other people, deflect the blame away from themselves towards others. Or even say that, well, we are not as bad as those other people who are really bad. I mean, there's so many games being played out there. And what happens to many of us as spiritual people, is that we become spiritual because we are starting to take responsibility for ourselves. And you look at a lot of people out there who haven't started doing that. And they are completely trapped in this game of denying that they are to blame, deflecting blame, or blaming others. You can see a few people like that on the spiritual path, but most people on the spiritual path are not really trapped in this blaming others so much, because we've come to a point where we are willing to take responsibility for ourselves. But unfortunately, that means that we open ourselves up to this planetary momentum, this planetary entity or beast of blame, blame, blame. You are to blame. And so what often happens to us as spiritual people is that when we start taking responsibility for ourselves, we go through this almost schizophrenic phase. I mean, I remember it from myself. It took years where I was willing to take responsibility for myself, but I couldn't handle this blame. So I was trying to take a little bit of responsibility without being overwhelmed by the blame. And back and forth and back and forth. I see so many other spiritual people who have done or are doing the same thing. So, what's really behind it? What is really behind this? Why do we have a planet where people are constantly blaming each other? And where even the smallest things you do in life can suddenly open you up to being blamed. And where many people, their entire lives are eaten up by this, trying to deflect blame, to deny that they are responsible, by blaming others, or defending themselves against attacks, or feeling bad for not being perfect. There's so many of these games, blame games, being played. But why is it? Where did they all come from? Well, I was thinking about that for a long time, and it wasn't until I got certain teachings from the Ascended Masters that it resolved itself for me. And there are three elements of those teachings. The first one is that the core of your being, I've explained this in many other videos, but the core of your being is the conscious you. And the important thing about this teaching, which many people haven't gotten, many psychologists, many spiritual teachers, they haven't gotten it. The importance of this is that the core of your being is a spirit, a spiritual being, which means it cannot be changed by defined by or even affected by anything that happens in the material world. Why? Because a spirit is made of energies from the spiritual realm that are of a higher vibration. And everything in the material universe is of a lower vibration. It's like trying to take mud and get it to stick to a sunbeam. Somebody standing there with a shovel throwing mud at a sunbeam. Is the mud going to stick to the sunbeam? No. Nothing that happens on earth is going to stick to the conscious you. That's why the second element of the teachings is that what makes us feel blamed is that we are experiencing a situation and reacting to it through one of these separate selves, the subconscious selves, that are based on duality. Those selves, it's not really that the self or the ego feels blame. It's just that the self is projecting you're to blame because of something you did. And when you are looking at the situation and yourself through that filter of the self, then you feel blame. Take note of this. The ego doesn't feel blame. You are the only one who can feel blame. But you only do it when you are experiencing through a separate self. It's again putting on the color glasses and the sky looks colored. Take them off and the sky looks the way it always looks. So these are two elements. The conscious you is a spirit, and nothing from the material world can stick to the spirit. Okay? But now another element of the Master's teachings is that blame isn't natural. It isn't necessary. It's not inevitable. It's very avoidable. And I have a whole series of discourses they're called the Avatar Psychology, where I talk about there are beings who came to Earth from a different kind of planet, which is a natural planet. And on a natural planet, you don't find the murder and mayhem you find on Earth, but also you don't have any blame. And this ties in with understanding, who we are. And I have a video called How the World Was Created. And in it I explain that we are created to be co-creators, ultimately with our Creator, but also with the Ascended Masters that created the Earth. We are meant to be co-creators. Now, in the natural state, which is what you have, of course, on a natural planet, you are just experimenting. As a co-creator, you're just experimenting. You are creating a mental image in your mind, you're projecting it upon the matter light, and then you see what the matter light outpictures in your particular environment. You can't always know ahead of time. That's the whole idea of learning and gradually expanding your sense of self. So you're just experimenting. When you see the result of your action, you evaluate. Do I want more of this, more of the same? Or do I want more than this? If you want more, you keep projecting through the same mental image. If you want some more than this, then you refine your mental image. But on a natural planet, everything is just an experiment. You don't have the dualistic concept of right or wrong. So, an experiment doesn't turn out exactly how you wanted it. You don't blame yourself, nobody else blames you. You just refine your mental images and change what you're projecting out. Why blame? Did it work or didn't it work? Is it what I wanted or not what I wanted? Where's the blame here? How could you go wrong? You want something else, you just change it. So, on Earth, of course, this is an unnatural planet, so there is blame. But where does blame come from? This is a very important question to consider. Where does blame come from? And I remember for many years, when I first started hearing about Ascended Masters and Ascended Master teachings, I was very confused about this. And I've seen many other people who heard about these concepts who were confused. The Ascended Masters, through the organization I was involved with called the Summit Lighthouse, they gave a lot of teachings about personal Christhood, which is a higher state of consciousness, where we're able to discern between what is of the Christ mind, the one mind, and what is of the Antichrist mind, the separate mind. So, in the beginning I thought that the Christ mind operated with these concepts of right and wrong. And therefore I thought that the Christ mind was actually the origin of blame, because when you saw, according to the Christ mind, that you had done something wrong, you should feel blame, because that would help you to motivate you to not do it again. But what I realized later was that this was actually not the case. There is no blame in the Christ mind. That's why there's no blame on a natural planet. Because the Christ mind basically evaluates, will this bring you closer to oneness or will it not? It doesn't say it's right or wrong. It just gives you that frame of reference. This is in line with the one mind. This is not in line with the one mind. But there's no blame either way. The Christ mind is always ready to help you come back to oneness, even if you've gone into separation. So blame doesn't come from the Christ mind. So where does it come from? Well, it can only come from the anti-Christ mind. And that is the dualistic mind. And this is logical when you think about it. Because in the one mind, the unified, undivided mind, where's the room for a division into right and wrong? There can only be the concepts of right and wrong that are opposite polarities in the dualistic mind. And that's the mind of Antichrist. So when I realized that, which took me some time, but when I realized that blame had to come from somewhere else. And this is another element of the Master's teachings that I also explained in my video about how the world was created, that there are these beings who deliberately rebelled against the one mind or the progress of the entire world of form we are in. They are called fallen beings, and I explained that in the other video. So the fallen beings have gone into this consciousness of duality, and therefore they have created these concepts right and wrong. And they have also created the idea that if you do something wrong, you are to blame, and you should feel blamed. And if you think about this, I'm pretty sure that if you're listening to this, if you're a spiritual person, you have a pretty good sense of intuition. And intuition can allow you to read the vibration of energy. So just use that. You can especially do it in your heart, where you can sense whether something raises your energy or lowers your energy. Just think about blame. Think about a situation where you were blamed. Somebody directed blame at you. Can't you sense this is a very low vibration? It's definitely not a love-based vibration, right? There's no love in blame. There's only the desire to put down. So we can't really understand the blame games that we see are played on earth unless we understand that there were these fallen beings who were allowed to embody on earth. I explained why that was the case in the other video. But they were allowed to embody on earth, and what they're trying to do is basically trying to control humanity and to destroy those who won't be controlled. And as I explained in my avatar videos, there was also a number of avatars who volunteered to take embodiment on Earth. We came from natural planets to sort of hold the balance for the fallen beings so they can't destroy the planet. In other words, the future of the planet is up to the original inhabitants. And so, so what happened to us as avatars was that when we came to Earth, we were deliberately attacked by the fallen beings. And of course, the original inhabitants were also exposed to this attack from the fallen beings, but not quite as vicious as avatars were. And so what happened when we were attacked by the fallen beings was we were exposed to something we had never experienced on a natural planet. First of all, there was the whole idea of right and wrong, but what we had never experienced before was that we could be wrong, that there could be something wrong with us. Now you think about this. You have two levels of blame in a sense. You have a level where you can say somebody took an action that had a certain consequence. And based on the consequence, you can say that was the wrong action. But that's one level of blame. It is clearly a level of blame. You did something wrong. But there's a deeper level of blame, and that is you are wrong. there's something wrong with you. And this is what the fallen beings projected at us as avatars, and of course at human beings as well. Want an example of this? Original sin, the crowning achievement of the Catholic Church. We are sinners by nature, by our creation. In other words, by the very fact that you exist, there's something wrong with you, and you need to compensate for that by being a good Catholic. And, you know, if you think about this, right there, you have a direct example of what the fallen beings love to do to us and to the inhabitants of Earth. Because what they want to do two things. They want to either get you to support them so you blindly follow them, like the people who were standing there at Hitler's rallies and screaming Heil Hitler, you know, being totally hypnotized by him. So this is one thing they want to do. If they can't get us to do that, to follow them or support them, they want to pacify us. And how do they pacify us? Through the blame game. You see, when you come as an innocent being and you are exposed to this very severe, very aggressive blame from the fallen beings, it's pretty difficult not to react to it. Because you never experienced this before, you're just shocked, you know. And so how do we react to it? By creating a subconscious self. And the subconscious self is created so that whenever you are blamed, it takes over your reactions and deflects the blame so you can live with it. You think about this. The idea that there's something wrong with you is unbearable. Especially for an avatar, especially for a spiritually aware person. When, as I said, when you start taking responsibility for yourself, you are looking at your own actions. You see many people in the world who haven't taken responsibility for themselves. They're not looking at their actions. They're not thinking, oh, could I be wrong? Many people, for example, they say, oh, if I live up to this standard, I'm a good Catholic, I go to a church, I go to confession, then I don't need to look at myself and consider whether I'm right or wrong. But as a spiritual person, you need to look at yourself, and therefore, in the beginning, it's inevitable that you are still so affected by these blame games that you're looking at yourself, oh, did I do something wrong? And at some point you will have to deal with this. Am I wrong? Is there something wrong with me? I remember dealing with this. It took me years to work through this. And it was these things that I mentioned here that helped me work through it and see this is all unreality. It's just all nonsense created by the fallen beings in order to try and control us. Now, as I said, they direct this blame at us. We're creating a subconscious self to deal with it. But the subconscious self is made out of duality, which means the subconscious self can never fully deflect blame because, as I said before, there's no ultimate argument in duality. So you're actually not creating one self, you are creating two. And so next time you're blamed, you are reacting. You're either reacting with the one self that deflects or the one self that makes you feel bad and think you have to change. But there is no reaction that can completely suppress that accusation that there could be something wrong with you. So the next time you're accused, you create another self or another two selves. And so what is happening here, now think about this, when you have created a sufficient number of selves, the cells form the ego. And the effect of the ego is that you are pacified by your own internal struggle. Just think about this. In the beginning, let's just take a fictive scenario, okay? You're coming to Earth as an avatar. There's a specific fallen being that sees you as a threat, and it's assigned by other fallen beings in the higher realms to attack you. So the fallen being attacks you, blames you, you are wrong because you did this that wasn't perfect. There's something wrong with you. You create selves that are reacting to the fallen being. It accuses you again, you create more selves. But there comes a point where you have now created so many selves that the fallen being no longer needs to direct blame at you. Because all of your attention is eaten up by the internal process of these cells reacting to each other. You see, there comes a point where There's a self reacting to another self, reacting to a third self. And you see what I'm trying to say? Your mind becomes a treadmill, a closed system. You don't even need to be blamed by the fallen being anymore, because you're blaming yourself and reacting to the blame. And the treadmill is just running. And your conscious you is running on it, like a hamster. And so the fallen being can say, okay, I took care of that person, now let's focus on, let me get to the next person. And this is how it is with most people on earth. They are caught in this hamster wheel. Blame, reacting to blame, blaming others, this and that and the next thing. And it just keeps going. And there are people who have been trapped in it for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. Now, you may still feel a certain tendency to blame yourself, but if you were completely trapped on the hamster wheel, you wouldn't be listening to this. You wouldn't be a spiritual person. So you have already started to see the hamster wheel. You just need to become more aware. Now, how do you get off this reaction? Well, there's two ways. One aspect is, as I've explained in many videos, to invoke spiritual light and intercession from the Ascended Masters. You can call to the Ascended Masters to protect you from this energy being directed at you from the outside. I said there's a specific fallen being that was attacking you, but there are also these collective entities that have been created that are constantly directing blame at us. So you can protect yourself from this coming from the outside by invoking protection from Archangel Michael. You can call to the Elohim Estrella to cut you free from any ties to this mass consciousness. And you can invoke the violet flame to transmute the blame energy you have in your own emotional body. So that's one aspect of it. But in the long run, the way to be free of it is simply to become more aware. You become aware of this. And there are two aspects of this again. There is the awareness of the hamster wheel, the game, the blame games, what they do, how they work, how it keeps you trapped, and how ultimately it's completely unreal. But then there is the really crucial part of it. You can become aware that you are the conscious you, and therefore you are spirit, you are a spiritual being. And it does not matter how many lifetimes you have spent playing these blame games. None of it has changed the conscious you. None of it can stick to the sunbeam of the conscious you. It's just mud. And when you experience yourself as pure awareness, as an extension of your I Am Presence, as an extension of the Ascended Masters, you can see the unreality of the blame games. And therefore you can decide, I don't want to keep playing them. You see, in a sense, you could say that in the beginning, when you were attacked by the fallen beings, the conscious you made a choice to react, how to react. And this created the self. But as a result of creating all of these selves, your reaction is automatic. That's why it's a hamster wheel, because you're not making a decision how to react. So, in a sense, your initial choices in reacting to the fallen beings suspended your free will. You're not making a free will choice through these selves, you're just reacting through the selves. But when you become aware that you're the conscious you, and that you haven't been changed by the outer personality, you're not defined by the outer personality, you can take back your free will and make conscious choices and say, I don't want to do this anymore. So how do you do it? Well, there's two ways. First of all, there's the recognition that whenever you are blaming someone else or yourself, you're doing it through the consciousness of Antichrist. You're doing it through subconscious selves, and you're doing exactly what the fallen beings want you to do, so they can pacify you and steal your energy. And you have to decide, I'm not going to do this anymore. They are not going to get away with this. They're not going to trap me in this game. So you have to decide to stop blaming. You stop blaming others, you stop blaming yourself, You stop defending yourself when others are blaming you. And this can then lead you to the second level of decision, which is this. Now you think about computer games. I personally have spent very little time playing computer games, but I have at least looked at what a computer game is. And I've heard people talk about how when you get good at a game, there comes to a point where you can beat the game. In other words, you have taken the game as far as it can be taken, you have mastered every level of the game, so you've beaten the game. That is not the way to be free of ego games. You will not be free of an ego game by beating the game or beating the ego. How do you become free of an ego game? By walking away from the game. And that's what you can do when you realize, I am the conscious you. I have played this ego game, but I haven't been changed by it. I haven't been defined by it, and I can just walk away from it. You see, what the ego wants us to do is to take the blame game to some extreme. In my last one about responsibility, I had this pie chart. And I said that there are many experiences we can have on Earth. And it's fine to explore and go further and further from the center, go more towards the periphery. But as long as we still are connected, we can go back to the center, we can play another game, another role. But when we go into duality, we get trapped in a specific slice. And now we are thinking the only way for the ego to feel secure is to go as far as you can go in this slice. You go to the periphery, and then the ego thinks that's where security is. So when it comes to blame, the ego thinks when you get to the ultimate state where you can blame others and you can deflect any blame they direct at you, then the ego will feel secure. First of all, that's a lie. The ego will never feel secure. Second of all, it can't be done. There is no ultimate defense against blame, because in duality there's no ultimate argument, as I've tried to explain many times. So it's an impossible quest, and that's why you, as the conscious you are able to step outside of it, look at the game and say, oh, I see that it's all unreal. It's just like a computer game. Somebody just sat there and programmed it. It has no ultimate reality. And that's why you can realize, what is it that a computer game does for you? It gives you a certain experience while you're playing it. Maybe it gives you an experience where outside the game that you are good at it. But nevertheless, it's just an experience. You do realize in a computer game that it's not the real world you're playing in. So, at least I hope people realize this, even though one might doubt it sometimes. So you need to come to that point where you realize that the blame games played by the ego, although they seem real, they're just complete like computer games. They're just something projected at you. Now this is difficult, I understand. I totally admit it's difficult. It took me, again, years to work through it, because we are in the physical world. We have these physical bodies. If you walk across the street and don't look, you can get hit by a bus. And when you are lying in the hospital with broken bones, it's pretty difficult not to think you made a wrong choice. And you are to blame for doing this to yourself. Or if you do something that has similarly negative consequences for other people. If you were driving the bus, for example. So we have these physical consequences. And like I said with the responsibility games, you begin to see the responsibility games are unreal. But it doesn't mean you abandon all physical responsibility for other people or for fitting into a social setting with other people. That's not what I'm talking about. It's not that you are not taking responsibility for having done something that created a certain consequence that you might need to compensate for. But you don't have to do it with this mindset of blaming. You see what I've said about the colored glasses? Okay? I'm sitting here right now. I'm looking at this camera. I can put on a pair of colored sunglasses, and it colors what I'm looking at, but I'm still seeing the camera. So you see what I'm saying? There is a real world we're living in. We are doing physical things that has physical consequences. Yes. It's not that we are to deny this. I'm not trying to get you to deny that you did something that had a physical consequence. But what I'm saying is that the blame game is like putting on the colored glasses. And now it seems like you have to blame yourself for creating the physical consequence so that you feel there's something wrong with you. Instead of, as I said, on a natural planet, you're just experimenting. And I know very well that this is a process that takes time. But I'm hoping that by you hearing this, it won't take you as long as it took for me to resolve this. Because you really can come to a point where you can resolve it. And you can come to a point where you don't feel the need to accept blame. It doesn't mean you don't take the consequences of your actions, that you deny all consequences. But you don't feel blamed. And therefore you don't feel the need to defend yourself against other people blaming you. You don't feel the need to blame others. I mean, you see what I said before about the mind becomes this closed system that's fighting itself? It's because many people, they feel blame directed at them, but in order to deny it, deflect it, they are blaming somebody else. But this keeps you trapped in the blaming consciousness, in the blaming game. And as a spiritual person, you have to come to a point where you see this and you make a conscious decision. I will not play this game. I will find the off button and turn off the computer. Because it's not a matter of beating the game, it's a matter of being free of the game. Now, as I said, these ego discourses are based on these books, and this one is Freedom from Ego Games. And I just want to go over what is said in the book about how you free yourself from these games. It begins with, you realize you're the conscious you, you're pure awareness, you haven't been changed by anything you have done or experienced on earth. The other realization is, as I said in the responsibility games, your free will is individual, right? And free will is the basic law of the universe. You're responsible for your choices. You're not responsible for other people's choices. You're responsible for your state of mind. You're not responsible for other people's state of mind. And when you recognize this, you can see one thing. Whatever people did to you, it hasn't changed you. Whatever you experience, it hasn't changed the conscious you. Because the conscious you is pure awareness. I know it's difficult because you basically have to have experienced this pure awareness. But if you're spiritual, you probably have, even if you didn't quite realize it. Probably realize being aware without thinking, without having your normal thought process. And when you realize that, you realize if nothing in this world can change you, why feel threatened by anything? Why feel threatened by the blame? When you're in the blame game, you're constantly, even if you're not aware of it, constantly, could I be blamed here? In any situation you're in, could I be blamed? Could I be blamed? Or you are constantly thinking, how can I blame others? There must be something wrong here. There's always something wrong. Somebody needs to be at fault and needs to be blamed. But why? Why feel threatened by this blame game and you realize nothing has changed you? So then you can say, other people may cause you to create a spirit in order to react like the fallen beings did. But you have to choose to create it. Now most people, if you tell them about these subconscious spirits, they'll react with fear. Because they'll feel that, oh, this is something in my subconscious mind I don't have control over, but it can control me. So they'll rather deny it. It's like a smoker who says, smoking isn't going to harm me. It may harm all these other people, but not me. But you see, when you're a spiritual person, if you want to really grow, you have to acknowledge that you have these selves, reactionary patterns in your subconscious mind. And when you recognize that you created them, what do? You take back your free will, because what you have created you can uncreate. This is what the fallen beings are trying to get you to deny. They want you to think that once you have made a certain choice, you were changed and you can never undo it. Therefore, you are a bad person forever, or until Jesus comes and saves you. But that's not reality. Nothing has changed the conscious you. And that means that when you have chosen to create a spirit, what has changed is not the conscious you, just the way you experience the world. But because you made a choice to create the spirit, you can make another choice to, as I said, walk away from the spirit. You just let it die, turning off the computer, refusing to play the game. So then the next step you can take is you can realize that all of the people in the world, they are acting, talking, thinking, feeling based on their current state of consciousness, which includes all of the subconscious spirits they have, right? So you're meeting another person, or you're interacting with another person you've known for a long time. That person is simply expressing itself through all of these filters of all of these subconscious selves. And this means that the person, it's not that they are deliberately and consciously choosing to do something to you or say something to you. If they are blaming you, for example, it's not like the conscious you is deciding to blame you. It's the person is simply activating a subconscious spirit that's blaming you, right? So people's actions, people's words, they're coming from these subconscious spirits. A spirit isn't deliberately attacking or seeking to hurt you either. Because the self is like a computer. The ego is like a computer. It can only act on its programming. Right? Now, if you opened up your computer one day and the computer displayed a message saying, you were a bad person for hitting the enter key. You shouldn't have hit the enter key. You would say, where does this nonsense come from? You would realize the computer isn't thinking. Now, if you open your Facebook account and somebody has put a hateful comment on your Facebook page, then you realize there's a human being there. But what I'm saying is, even a human being isn't, in many cases, more conscious than a computer. They are still just acting on these subconscious selves that are like computer programs. So, if people aren't actually attacking you personally, why do we take it personally? This was such a revelation for me when I realized, why do I have to take it personally? In other words, somebody is blaming you. And at some point, 15 years ago, I had somebody who was really blaming me in a very public way. In the beginning, of course, I took it personally. And then it hit me one day, why am I taking this personally? Just because somebody's blaming me, do I have to take it personally? Especially if I realize this person is just acting based on these subconscious selves. So, why do we even feel we have to respond to these kind of attacks? Well, it's because we take it personally. But why do we take it personally? Because you have subconscious selves that take it personally. They are programmed to take everything personally because the cells will feel any blame on you is a personal attack and it has to be dealt with. You can't just not react. But see, a self can't not react. They can't choose not to react because it's like a computer program. You hit a certain key and a computer responds. But the conscious you isn't a computer. It can choose to look at the situation and say, why do I have to react to this? I don't want to react to this. And you just let it go. Okay. Now comes the next realization. Other people are reacting based on their subconscious selves, but so are you. We are all reacting, right? Your ego is made up of these subconscious selves, and they can only react. Like I said, it's just, somebody blames you, a self kicks in and takes over, right? But again, it's the self that takes things personally. It's not the conscious you. Because when the conscious you realizes who it is, that it hasn't been changed by any attack directed at you, any blame directed at you, that it can't change the conscious you, you don't need to take it personally. And it's only when you don't take it personally that you can avoid reacting, because then you're not activating one of these selves. And that's when you can start making conscious choices. So, in a sense, we can say that the ego is created to take things personally. But you don't have to. The conscious you doesn't have to. So it's just a matter of, do you want to continue experiencing life through these selves that are created out of these blame games? Or do you want to take back your self-awareness, your free will, and say and realize, I can walk away from this. I can stop playing these blame games. So just to kind of summarize here, the blame games are designed to make your mind a closed system, a hamster wheel, where you, the conscious you, you're just running. You're trying to catch up to something, but you never do. You have blame directed at you. You have one self that reacts to the blame. Then there's another self that blames you for reacting in the first place, and this just keeps going. Now you're defending yourself against the blame, but that blame actually came internally. So you see what I'm saying? There's blame coming from you externally, but you're even blaming yourself. The selves are blaming you internally. And you got to break down the hamster wheel. You just got to break it down. And really the only way to break it down is to jump off. You see a hamster, it can run for a while, but at some point it just runs off. It just jumps off. And because it's hungry. And so, you have to find a way to trick your subconscious selves, to neutralize your subconscious selves, so that the conscious you can become aware, can step back from it. Because when we're on the hamster wheel, of course, we are sucked into the selves, and we are experiencing everything through the selves. So we have to step back and see the hamster wheel from the outside, and see that it's actually not the conscious you that's running on the hamster wheel. It's the subconscious selves that are running on the hamster wheel. But you can step outside of it and look at it and say, oh, I don't want to have my life eaten up by this. And the only way to do it is to realize that it's all unreal. It's all just a game created, ultimately by the fallen beings, but by your ego and the internal spirit. Because nothing that could happen on earth has changed the conscious you. And in a sense, you could say that one of the ways you can trick yourself is you can consider based on responsibility. You can say, okay, I can see that when I was 5 years old, I was bullied by an older child. I created a subconscious self to deal with bullies. Now I'm an adult. there's a person at my work who's bullying me. And I can see that so far I have reacted through that subconscious self I created when I was 5. So I have been, even though I'm an adult now, I have reacted to this situation as a 5-year-old. Now, what there will happen in that situation is there will be another subconscious self. Oh yes, you're bad, you shouldn't have reacted like a 5-year-old, you should be an adult. But you can ignore that also, because what I'm saying is, you took certain actions, probably evasive actions, to react to the bully. But did you take the action, or did the subconscious self that you created when you were 5 take the action? You see what I'm saying? You didn't make a deliberate conscious choice as the conscious you, realizing you could do anything in this situation. You didn't make a choice to react. You just let that subconscious self take over. When you become aware of that, you can say, am I, as the conscious you, am I really responsible for the actions I took through that self? So as a way to trick yourself, you can say, no, I'm not responsible for this, and that means I don't have to defend myself, I don't have to blame myself, I can choose another action. I have a right, now that I'm aware of this, to choose another action right now. Again, I'm not saying that when you take actions that have consequences for other people that you shouldn't take responsibility for it. But what I'm saying is there is a big difference between feeling responsible for something that wasn't the result of a conscious choice. Because if you don't realize it was the result of a conscious choice, how can you change it? So there's a big difference between that and then realizing, oh, that was just an action taken by the spirit. But now that I've become aware that I am the conscious you, I can choose another action. And I have a right to do this. You see, basically, what will help us overcome all of the ego games is that we become aware. I am the conscious you. And regardless of how I look at myself through the outer mind, regardless of what has happened in Earth in this and many past lifetimes, I haven't been changed by anything. I am who I am. The conscious you is who it is in reality. It's pure awareness, it's neutral awareness, it's none of the outer personality created on Earth. But in the here and now, when you're seeing yourself and you're experiencing life through the separate selves, then you are who you think you are. But you see, who you are is reality. Pure awareness, neutral awareness, an extension of your I am present, spirit, the sunbeam. This is reality. Who you think you are is all unreality. It's just created by the ego and the ego games and all of these things that are happening on Earth. Shakespeare had the saying, there is nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. You are neutral awareness. The conscious you are your neutral awareness. Everything else is thinking. It's unreal, and it only is what it thinks it is. And therefore, the key to overcoming all of the ego games is to realize that the ego cannot change who it thinks it is any more than a computer can change its programming. But the conscious you can. And it's not a matter of thinking something different. It's a matter of stepping outside of the dualistic thinking. Now take note here. If you take what I'm saying and to an extreme, then you would have to say, well, then I can no longer exist in a physical body on this planet. I just have to die, or ascend, or fade away into nothingness. This is what some of these non-duality teachers are saying. When you overcome the separate self, you have no self. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what the Ascended Masters are saying. You can still be in physical embodiment, you can still be on Earth, you can still be making choices. But they are not based on duality. You see, thinking, dualistic thinking, is what makes everything seem like it has to be fit on this scale, live up to this standard of what's right and wrong, good or bad. And it has to be a value judgment. But as the conscious you can overcome that. So you're still functioning. You're still fully functioning in the physical body. You're making choices. You're interacting with other people. But you're not doing it from the state of duality. You're not interacting with other people through the ego games, but through that state of neutral awareness, which is the ultimate peace of mind. And of course, the whole point of all of these ego discourses is to help you approach that state of mind. So hopefully this will help you.